In this video, I'm going to show you how to transfer your beer from primary to secondary and from secondary to keg with little to no oxidation, and that's coming up next. All right, so before we get started and people start commenting about how what I'm showing is dangerous and leaving me comments about how it's irresponsible and all that, I just wanted to point something out. I have had several carboys that were fermenting and the airlock became plugged in the cap and it built up enough pressure to actually blow the cap off. What I'm showing in this method is 5 psi or less of pressure to do the transfer to start the siphon. And once you start the siphon, you really don't have to worry too much about holding a lot of pressure. You just have to maintain some positive pressure. So you have to use common sense and make sure that you're not putting 20 to 30 psi in your carboy, because you can definitely explode it. But I just wanted to address that before we get started. So let's jump into it and take a look at what components you're going to need to do this pressure transfer. You're going to need a racking cane, and stick around to the end of the video because I will be showing you how to make a racking cane for this process from components that you may already have in your brewery. You're going to need a carboy cap. Depending on which carboy you're transferring from, you'll need the corresponding cap for that. You're going to need a pretty good length of transfer or siphon hose, enough to get from a fully extended racking cane in the top of the primary fermenter all the way down to the bottom of the secondary. So you'll want a pretty good length there. You'll also need a carbonation cap with a 5/16 bar bend, and that 5/16 bar bend will allow us to insert the carbonation cap into the carboy caps either size and do the pressure transfer. You'll also need a CO2 tank with the corresponding gas line connector so you can connect it to the carbonation cap. Now, the way that I performed the pressurized transfer was I took all of my sanitized components, and here's a tip for you as well on that. A wallpaper tray is a great tool for sanitizing racking canes and hoses and that sort of thing. So I took the sanitized racking cane and inserted it into the top of the carboy cap. I also inserted the carbonation cap into the small hole in the carboy cap. Put the cap back on with the racking cane not submerged in the beer, but just up in the open space. I then connected my CO2 line to the carbonation cap and began forcing CO2 through the system, filling up the top portion of the carboy neck, as well as purging all of the oxygen out of the hose. Once I felt that I had purged the oxygen out of the hose, I put the transfer hose or the siphon hose down into the bottom of the secondary and began to push all of the oxygen out of that vessel as well. CO2 is heavier than oxygen, so it will fill up from the bottom up and push any oxygen out. 10 to 15 seconds should do it. And once that was completed, then I plunged the racking cane down into the beer with 4 to 5 psi and started the siphon. Once the siphon starts, you really don't have to worry about too much pressure. You just need to maintain some positive pressure so that the siphon will continue and not stop because of vacuum in the vessel. Once you complete with that, I do recommend, after you've transferred all of the beer, allow the system to maintain pressure and actually blow some bubbles up through the secondary so that it purges any oxygen that's in the neck of the secondary vessel. Put your secondary vessel cap on and you're ready for secondary fermentation. Now, to transfer from either your primary or your secondary vessel into a keg, you're going to pretty much repeat the process. My process is I will clean and sanitize my keg. I pressurize it with about 20 to 30 psi, purge that out completely a couple times so that I know that the entire vessel is filled with CO2. Then I can take the lid off of the keg, drop my siphon hose down into the bottom of the keg, and repeat that same process. Pressurize the primary or secondary vessel till you start a siphon. Continue that positive pressure until you've transferred all the beer. Put your cap back on your keg, pressurize it, put it in your keezer, and it'll be ready for carbonation. Now, one of the components that I showed in the video was a stainless steel racking cane that I purchased from Morebeer. They're about $14 or $15. They also make a complete assembly with a air filter and carboy cap and all that stuff. But if you don't want to spend all that money, you can actually take a 1/2 inch CPVC, which is the high temperature PVC. Here I'm showing you cutting that CPVC end into the racking cane assembly to prevent trub from pickup from the bottom. I simply cut some notches in it, cut those notches to the side. Then I took a round or rat tail file and actually filed the opening of that CPVC cap so that I was sure to get good flow around the tubing that was inserted into the O-ring. So that's a good budget option for you if you don't want to purchase one of those stainless steel racking canes, or if you have some components in your brewery that you're not using currently. You could also make a racking cane out of a piece of stainless steel tubing if you had some. So that's an option for you as well. So I hope that helps. I think you'll find if you use this method that your beers that are highly hopped will stay hoppier longer, and you're not going to have any of the other issues associated with oxygenation in beer, cardboard taste, stale beer, all those other attributes that oxygenation will cause in a beer. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing. We really appreciate it. Until next time, this is Brian with Short Circuit Brewers. We'll see you.